I thought, for the uninitiated, I'd start by asking you a little bit about your background, because you have a very interesting background. You're 33 years old. You've been an award-winning investigative journalist, I might add. Tell me a little bit about your background and what propelled you to run for office.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Well, I guess I'll start with the personal stuff. So my mother is an immigrant who came to the United States from Australia when she was in her early 20s. And she met my father. They settled down in Atlanta. My wife, Alicia, is also from Atlanta. She's an OBGYN doctor at Grady Hospital, working mostly in labor and delivery. So, I mean, just the heroism of her and her colleagues. Say that again?
I just want to mention I used to live in Atlanta, and I have a lot of family from Atlanta, and my dad's from Dublin, Georgia. So I'm very familiar with the state. So it's fun for me to hear you mention Grady Hospital. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
I was at the Hometown Grill in Dublin like 72 hours ago.
Seriously?
Yeah, I really was. I was just in Dublin. Yeah.
Funny. Anyway, so your wife's an OBGYN, which is very impressive. Continue. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, she's an OBGYN, and I run a 30-year-old media production company called Insight, TWI. We produce undercover
We had some technical difficulties, so sorry.
Yes. No problem. No problem. It was on my end. Where did you lose me?
I lost you after you were talking about your wife being an OBGYN and how your mom's an immigrant, and really that's where we kind of lost you.
Got it. Yes. So Alicia works as an OBGYN, mostly at Grady here. And I run a 30-year-old media production company that's called Insight TWI. And we specialize in a few things, mostly long-term undercover investigations of corruption and organized crime, as well as investigations of war crimes and frontline conflict reports. So in the last few years, for example, we've produced multiple investigations of ISIS atrocities against women and girls in northern Iraq. We've produced long-term undercover investigations of human trafficking organizations, bribery of judges, murder for hire schemes, death squads. And I love doing this work because I'm passionate about exposing corruption and the abuse of power.
And you went to Georgetown, right? Did you go to the School of Public Service, right? At Georgetown, which a friend of mine just said is very, very difficult to get into. But what drew you to investigative reporting, and did that inspire you to want to run for office?
Well, I went to Georgetown School of Foreign Service because I was interested in foreign affairs and current affairs, and actually at that time thought that I might want to pursue a career in diplomacy. And the School of Foreign Service, a lot of folks who graduate from the SFS at Georgetown wind up going to the State Department. But my very first exposure to anything like public service was working as a very, very young man for Congressman John Lewis.
Right.
And I only spent a couple of months in his office, but being the kind of man that he was, he really took me under his wing and guided me through my career and my personal life, and became a mentor and a friend. And I wound up working for another member of Congress from Georgia named Hank Johnson. He was on the Armed Services Committee, which, as you know, oversees the Department of Defense. And so rather than going into diplomacy, I was working on foreign policy and national security policy in Congressman Johnson's office. But the truth is that after years working on Capitol Hill, I just became so disgusted by how corrupt Washington is, how lobbyists and cash run everything. This was around in the time when Mitch McConnell was blocking everything that President Obama wanted to do, so little was getting done. And that's why I went into journalism, is that it was a purer endeavor. And the opportunity to attack wrongdoing head on in the way that you can when you're producing investigative journalism for a large audience.
Before we talk about sort of, and if that in fact inspired you to run for office, John Lewis, it must have been heartbreaking for you, as it was for so many people across the nation, when he died of pancreatic cancer. And I had the pleasure of meeting him a number of times. And I'm curious how he really shaped your political views and how he influenced, who you are today.
Yeah, he had a profound impact on me. And I mean, it's interesting with what's happening in Georgia right now, Katie, and the sort of parallels and the way that all of this seems that it happens for a reason. And if you follow me through on this, is the very first time I had a meal with Congressman Lewis, what he wanted to talk to me about was the historic alliance between Jews and blacks in the South. And he wanted, because I was a young Jewish man working in his office, he wanted to talk to me about how he had marched alongside rabbis and Jewish activists in the civil rights movement. He at that time represented Georgia's 5th district, which, as you know, most of the city of Atlanta, with a large black and a large Jewish population. And he wanted to impress upon me how important he thought it was to nurture that alliance. And so I know now that he is looking down on what's happening in Georgia with pride, because you got the young Jewish journalist, son of an immigrant, mentored by John Lewis. And I'm running alongside, because remember, there's 2 Senate races, everybody who's tuned in. We got 2 Senate races in Georgia, and I'm running alongside a black preacher who holds Dr. King's pulpit at Ebenezer Baptist Church, who himself, Reverend Warnock, pastored John Lewis. And I just think that that's a beautiful clarification of where we are in Georgia now, how far we've come, that this is the team and this is the moment. And I think that Congressman Lewis, no doubt, is looking down and smiling on us.
I know the latest polls, John, show you and Reverend Warnock just 1 point, and the race is extremely close right now. And as you go on the campaign trail, what is animating voters in Georgia? Is it local, or do you think they're focused on local issues, or is it the fact that the Senate and the composition of the Senate hangs in the balance, and that if you and Reverend Warnock win, then it will be much easier for Joe Biden to get his agenda through?
Look, everybody knows that these implications are vast. Everybody knows that the Senate majority is on the line. So the national stakes are clear to voters here. And those national stakes mean that there is profound local impact. And the impact of these races in Georgia is similar to the impact on these races on the whole country. Whether the incoming administration will be able to resource the public health response and get funds to the CDC and hospital systems and nurses and doctors and epidemiologists who have been sidelined by the Trump administration this year. Whether the Biden administration will be able to pass direct stimulus relief for families and small businesses, and then invest in the kind of infrastructure, jobs, clean energy plan that we'll need to rebuild this economy. Whether we're going to be able to pass a new Voting Rights Act and a new Civil Rights Act. I mean, one of the things that I reflect on a lot, and thinking about the obligation that we have and the opportunity that we have here in Georgia to really make a difference, is that the next 2 years can be the most productive for civil and voting rights since 1964, 1965. And if we achieve that, if we pass a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act, that means criminal justice reform, that means an end to voter suppression. We'll look back on the peaceful mobilization that happened after Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd were killed as our generation's equivalent of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, that John Lewis and Amelia Boynton and Hosea Williams led. I mean, that is the opportunity that we have to make a difference here, but we can only get these things done if we win these races, because as everybody knows, the Senate majority hangs in the balance.
And in fact, you think that your age, you're 33 years old, John, that in a way it works to your advantage. Do you think you represent kind of a generational shift in the Democratic Party and the majority of people, although I think it's quite diverse and all ages, but the people who have really galvanized the movement for social justice in this country are on the younger side. So is that why you believe your age is an advantage for you?
Well, I think that young people are the core of so much of this energy within the Democratic Party right now, and youth turnout is essential to winning. And I think it does help to have some youth on the ballot. I mean, it's interesting because, folks ask me this question like, is being young a disadvantage? And what I think is that my youth is one of my greatest strengths as a candidate, because we have to get young people out to the polls, and that means we need perspectives in candidates that reflect the perspectives of a younger generation. I mean, young people right now are demanding change, demanding investment in clean energy and action on the environment, which has been deferred so long, demanding criminal justice reform and a new civil rights act and true equal justice under the law, which we simply do not have in this country. Young people are demanding the opportunity to go and get a college degree at a public college or at an HBCU without debt. And a lot of young people who have come out of school with huge debt are demanding significant student debt relief. So young people have demands, young people have needs, young people have unmet needs. And one of the important things that I want to do is communicate to all the young people out there that we can make change, we can enact legislation that will help, but you got to come out and vote for us to be able to do it.
That brings me to my next question. You know, a lot of people were motivated to come out and vote in November because of their support or lack thereof of Donald Trump. And there was fear from the very beginning, or at least after the election when the runoff was announced, that people were not going to turn out for a Senate race. And how are you fighting potential apathy about a Senate race, Jon?
I don't think there's any apathy at all. I mean, I truly don't feel concerned about that, because what I'm seeing here in Georgia is this huge energy that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris' victory here has helped to solidify. I think taking a step back, you know, there's been all this political organizing and volunteerism and this kind of renaissance in civic engagement in the Trump era, right? I mean, people who maybe never had been involved in politics before. A lot of this volunteerism led by women nationwide, you know, starting from the Women's March and on, and all of the grassroots donors. Our task now is to take this movement, which was built in opposition to Donald Trump, and not to let it wither, but to keep building this momentum and put it to work actually pursuing this positive agenda that we have to enact. So we are taking all of this energy and momentum and goodwill and volunteerism and infrastructure, and in Georgia, where the state's gotten younger and more diverse by the day, where we've registered hundreds of thousands of voters in just a couple of years, and the movement that we're building here in Georgia is about health, jobs, and justice. And we can only deliver health, jobs, and justice by winning. And I think people feel that and know that and are ready to vote. And early voting opens Monday.
On Monday, that's right. And I know Joe Biden is campaigning for you next week, I believe. Have you and the president-elect talked about the election in Georgia and your strategy, et cetera?
I haven't yet had the chance to speak with the president-elect. I don't want to intrude upon what I know is a very busy period of preparing to govern and preparing for this transition, which, by the way, has been and continues to be disrupted by this outrageous refusal by Donald Trump to accept the clear will of the people, concede the election, and hand over power. They're still trying to throw out the legally cast ballots of voters here in Georgia. This is an attack on democracy and voting rights unlike anything I can recall, certainly in recent American history. And it's really dangerous. And for David Perdue, my opponent, to be indulging this and attacking democracy here, David Perdue, imagine being a US senator and you're trying to throw out votes cast by your own constituents because they're not for your political party. I mean, that's low. We deserve a lot better than this. And President-elect Biden will be here on Tuesday, and this is just all about energizing turnout. People are feeling hope for the first time in 4 years. And what we have to do is make sure people realize that for that hope to be manifest in positive change, we got to get back out and vote again and win the Senate.
Not only has sort of the increased diversity of Georgia, not only does that reflect the so-called New South, but it's been really interesting, the political dynamics that have gone on in your state. I interviewed Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, a Republican, a Trump supporter who had to kind of stay strong and not bow to pressure, and even got death threats about the outcome in Georgia for the presidential race. Georgia turned red for the first time, blue for the first time since 1992.
Yep.
And so it's really been interesting to see Republicans have to resist the president's entreaties to kind of mess with the outcome or the results of the election. Has that opened the door for maybe some more bipartisan cooperation in Georgia, because you all are fighting against a so-called common enemy at this point?
Well, I think that what we're going to start to see is more of this. And what I mean is that there are going to be some voices within the Republican Party who kind of poke their heads up over the parapet as the dust settles and point out that Donald Trump just got beaten by the worst margin for an incumbent president seeking re-election since Roosevelt crushed Hoover in 1932, and that perhaps the GOP is going to have to change in order to build the kind of national coalition that it needs to win elections. I mean, remember after 2016, Democrats went through a lot of hand-wringing and introspection, and it's going to be worse because the GOP really needs to grapple with what's happened here. They've lost the presidency in the midst of the presidency. One of the things that I think is interesting is that my opponent, David Perdue, is talking out of both sides of his mouth on this. So like when he's on calls with establishment Republican donors, he puts blame for the fact that he's in a runoff squarely on Donald Trump. And he actually tells some of these Republican donors that not only did Biden win the election, he acknowledges it, but says that Biden's a better negotiator than Donald Trump is. But in public, Perdue is indulging the president's tantrum and sort of trying to pretend he actually believes Trump might have won. It's put my opponent and Kelly Loeffler, the other Republican senator, in a very awkward position where they're trying to please everybody, but everyone can tell that they're being dishonest.
Not only that, but Republicans like Lynn Wood, and who I know from my days at NBC, he represented a lot of high-profile clients. He's telling Republicans not to vote because the election was rigged. Is that still going on there? Because that sounds like a recipe for disaster for the GOP.
I don't know. I mean, I know Lynn Wood was in state and saying some wild stuff. And spreading a lot of misinformation. And although there's something amusing about it, we have to recognize that this is an attack on democracy sanctioned by the President of the United States. This is really serious. And if there were a shred of steel in David Perdue's spine, which we know there's not because the man's too much of a coward even to come out and debate me, but if he had any courage, if he were any kind of a statesman, then he would be standing up to Donald Trump and saying, the will of the people may not be as you want it, Mr. President, but it's still the will of the people. Instead, as I said, what David Perdue is trying to do is just please everybody. And so he's talking to the diehard Trump supporters and pretending that he's covering for the president. And he's talking to the Republican donors who want to move on and blaming the fact that he's in a runoff in Georgia on the president.
I know the New York Times has done some recently written some pieces about David Perdue, about his stock trading, about the fact that he's responsible for basically for stock trades that are nearly a third of all Senate trades reported in the past 6 years. I know he was under investigation for possible insider trading. Ultimately, it's important to point out prosecutors declined to bring charges. Is this resonating with people, some of these stories that have been circulating and reported on about David Perdue?
Oh, it's definitely resonating. And even among Republican voters in Georgia, those who plan on supporting Perdue are holding their nose to do it because they know he's been blatantly enriching himself in office. I mean, Perdue's campaign slogan at this point amounts to that he was not yet criminally indicted. It's a pretty low bar. Like you said, I mean, almost a third of all Senate stock trading, one guy. I think like more stock trades than the next 5 senators combined. And all year long, he's been telling people he doesn't order his own stock trades, but they impaneled a federal grand jury, subpoenaed banking records, and found that he does. It's not just that he's using his office to enrich himself. This is a really important point, Katie, in terms of how the people see David Perdue. You know, yes, he was buying shares in manufacturers of vaccines and medical equipment and dumping his casino shares in the early weeks of this pandemic while he was privy to classified briefings. The thing about it is he was doing all that while telling us this thing was no worse than the flu and blocking economic relief for ordinary people. It's like a cartoon villain level of corruption.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the fact that you're getting a lot of money. It's funny. I was just looking at some of these comments, Jon, and I know you're getting money from out of state. And I'm curious, you know, that was the case with Jamie Harrison, as you know, and I'm wondering if that's going to backfire at all, that people will think, you know, you're not Georgia's candidate, but out, you know, too beholden or getting too much support from outsiders. I'm just curious.
It doesn't worry me at all. I mean, for one, there's a lot more outside Republican super PAC money coming in than Democratic super PAC money. So look, let's just call it like it is. There's a lot of money from across the country coming in for and against the candidates in both parties. And that's because of the outsized national stakes of these races. Mm-hmm. Our political system needs to be reformed so that there isn't this vast influence of super PACs. We need to ban dark money. We need to ban corporate money and corporate PACs from politics. We need to bar lobbyists from making political contributions. We need to reduce individual giving limits. I mean, one of the reasons that, for example, there is no action on climate change, why it's so hard to make healthcare more affordable, why criminal justice is so difficult, is because of the power of the oil and gas lobby, the insurance lobby, and the private prison lobby. But I mean, the bottom line is that there's a lot of money coming from across the country to, you know, spend on ads in these two Senate races, and it's coming in on both sides.
So I'm curious. I know you call yourself a moderate Democrat, and it's interesting. Whenever I do these Instagram live interviews, Jon, and they're political in nature, people always bring out the word socialism. I think that that the Republicans were really, I think, successful in some ways of branding Democrats as quote unquote socialists. And I'm curious how you feel about the tension that exists between uber progressives in the party and more moderate Democrats, and how you see managing that so the party isn't splintered.
Well, first of all, I mean, if I call myself anything, I call myself a John Lewis Democrat. Mm-hmm. I call myself a civil rights Democrat. There's a different kind of Democratic candidate that emerges here in the South that reflects the values of states like Georgia and voters here in Georgia. So I don't align myself with any faction, any movement within the party, any major figure. I speak for myself, and my views are my views. So with that being said, in terms of the broader Democratic Party, I think it's healthy to have a big tent. I don't worry for a moment. And let me encourage, you know, Democrats here in Georgia, across the country, we should not worry about the nonsense that Republican super PACs say about us. You know, it doesn't worry me at all, Katie. It's like the most garden variety, paint by numbers, conventional, predictable fear mongering. And a lot of it is just about dividing people along racial and cultural lines. You know, they lengthen my nose in ads to remind everyone that I'm a Jew. The ads they're running against Reverend Warnock. You know, they talk about like the racist dog whistle. This is like a foghorn. And so I really don't spend any time worrying about what the GOP is saying about me on TV. I spend my time focusing on what I'm going to do for the people. Health, jobs, and justice for the people. Every single American deserves great health care, regardless of their wealth. Every single American needs economic relief right now at this moment of crisis. Every single American deserves equal justice under the law, regardless of race and regardless of class. So David Perdue and, you know, the folks in the GOP in DC, they can call me whatever they want. I really don't care. I'm focused on helping people and delivering for people and getting out the vote by inspiring people rather than defending myself against false attacks from the GOP.
Yeah, I know that we have to wrap because you're starting a bus tour tomorrow, so you probably have to get some rest and you're going to be very busy. And by the way, your press person, Jason, has been a real pleasure to work with. So tell him
Good.
Jake, I called him Jason. Jake, sorry, Jake.
I knew who you meant. I knew who you.
But before we go, I just wanted to ask you one more question, and I hopefully Jake won't get too upset with me. You know, the COVID relief package is that one of the things that frustrates you, that the elected officials on Capitol Hill cannot come up with a COVID relief package that is really going to help so many struggling Americans? And I know there's a lot about corporate liability that that a lot of Democrats are concerned about. But when you look at what's going on Capitol Hill, why is it so difficult to just get this piece of legislation passed, in your view?
Mitch McConnell. I mean, let's, you know, it's not just generically Congress. The House of Representatives passed a major COVID relief package like 7 months ago. The House acted 7 months ago. It's the Senate under Mitch McConnell's control that is blocking stimulus checks, that is blocking small business relief, that is blocking aid for state and local governments, which includes our local school districts and public safety and police departments, all of whom are struggling now because tax revenues are down. So, I mean, this is not sort of just a bipartisan problem and a pox on both their houses. This is Mitch McConnell doing what Mitch McConnell does, which is block everything, because all he cares about is his own power. And so if we're going to wrap, and Jake's giving you a hard time, I'd love to just keep talking. But if we're going to wrap, I guess I just would say this, is that if we remember what McConnell tried to do to President Obama, that's exactly what he's going to try to do to Joe and Kamala. It's going to be gridlock, shutdowns, paralysis. He's going to block COVID relief. He's going to block civil rights and voting rights. He's going to block affordable health care. We can't allow that to happen when people are counting us. He's going to block a $15 minimum wage. He's going to block student debt relief. I mean, we really need to win these races because we need to enact legislation and govern and get things done.
Well, maybe you'll talk to me again. I wanted to ask you about myths and disinformation, how you're stopping that. Someone said they didn't want to defund the police, so couldn't support you, which I don't know if you want to respond to that, because I do feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding about the whole word defund the police, and that people, I think it needs rebranding. I've said this repeatedly during these interviews, but since someone says they can't support you because of that, do you want to clarify your position at all real quickly before you go?
Well, I don't support defunding the police, and I would encourage that person to support our efforts to reform policing and criminal justice in this country. And I would encourage that person to get on board with the push for a new Civil Rights Act, which will establish national standards for the use of force, which will demilitarize local police forces, which will ensure that there's accountability where anyone's civil rights are violated, will ensure there's true accountability for police brutality and racial profiling. There's a lot we need to do to achieve criminal justice reform in this country. We need to reform our drug laws. We need to reform our prisons. But the answer is not defunding the police. The answer is embarking upon a robust program of reform so that there is true equal justice for all people in this country.
All right. I'm glad you got a chance to respond to that comment, because I feel like it's important for you to clarify your position and for people to do their homework. Well, Jon Ossoff, thanks so much for talking with us on this Saturday late afternoon. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can talk again, perhaps after January 5th, which happens to be my daughter's birthday.
Is it really? Okay, well, I hope that she has a great birthday, and I know that it will be a great day for Georgia and for the country because we're going to win these two races. I'm grateful to you, Katie, for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm grateful for all of the reporting and journalism and the superb interviews that you've conducted throughout your career, helping to inform the public about where candidates stand and what the issues of the day are. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to address all of your fans and followers. And I wish you good health and your family good health.
Thank you very much, Jon. I appreciate it. And I'm just reporting a bad comment because I do not like these bad comments. So I'll hopefully talk to you in the future, and give my best to your wife and tell her thanks for all the great work she does every day.
I'll pass that along. And by the way, we've now discovered TikTok as a campaign. Are you on TikTok, Katie?
I am not on TikTok, Jon. I should try to do it, but I only have so much bandwidth for social media, you know. I do a lot of stuff, and I don't know. I feel I'm sort of embarrassed to get on TikTok because I feel like it's for like 18, 15-year-olds, but maybe I should try it.
Well, will you do me a favor and just say hello and happy holidays to the TikTok family?
I will.
Great.
Now,
yeah, I was actually thinking for the people, because they're going to be tuned in.
Hey, TikTok family, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, happy everything.
Happy everything, happy holidays, TikTok family. And Katie, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right, Jon. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.